Tonight we'll be talking about 13 haunted places around the world that you can visit. And starting with number 1, we have the Marfa Lights in Texas. The mysterious lights in this small Texas town are still an unsolved phenomenon. Dozens of people gather at sunset on a decommissioned World War II airbase 6 miles east of Marfa, Texas. This gathering occurs on most nights. There is a long strip of asphalt next to a highway US 90 where RVs, cars and pickup trucks park. A pavilion sits in the centre of this area, and an observation area hosts binocular pedestals like you would find on the Empire State Building. When darkness is full, everyone trains their eyes on the southeast horizon. They are waiting to see the Marfa Lights. White and red lights have been observed since the 1800s on this horizon outside Marfa. The lights have been observed moving across the horizon, doubling back and then suddenly disappearing. Marfa is 267 miles south of Roswell, New Mexico. For some, the connection seems pretty clear. For others, the lights are a tradition and touchstone for the people in this West Texas desert on the high plains. Let us know your thoughts, and have you seen the Marfa Lights? Next, we'll be visiting the Alamo at San Antonio, Texas. And for decades, people from all walks of life have told chilling tales of ghostly experiences at the Alamo. Strange, smoky spirits that wander its grounds, screams heard from inside its walls, sounds of explosions, even faint trumpet notes of El Degüello, the ancient Spanish call of no quarter that Santa Anna ordered, played during the final assault on the fort. It's important to remember that the Alamo is essentially a cemetery, a place where 182 Texans defenders died and 1,600 Mexican soldiers were either killed or wounded on March 6, 1836. Their remains were dismembered, burned, dumped into the San Antonio River, or simply left to the elements. It was one of the bloodiest battles in American and Texas history. The first account of ghosts at the Alamo came only a few days after its fall. General Antonio Lopez de Santa Anna left San Antonio in the hands of General Juan Joseph Andrade, who made camp several miles from the Alamo because of the carnage and disease borne by the bodies left in the sun. When Santa Anna sent word for Andrade to destroy the Alamo, the general sent a colonel with a contingent of men to carry out the orders. The men came rushing back with frightening story of 6 diablos or devils guarding the front of the old mission. The spectres were screaming at the advancing Mexican soldiers and waving flaming sabres in their hands. When General Andrade went to investigate the incident in person, he described 6 men with balls of fire in their hands advancing on his terrified troops. While on the subject of the 6 diablos, another prominent haunting comes instantly to mind. Many people believe that all of Alamo's 182 defenders died in the battle. This is not exactly speaking correct. Several of those who took part in the battle actually survived the attack. Among these, reports by General Manuel Fernandez de Castrillon, General Martin Perfecto de Cos, and Colonel, later General Juan Jose Andrade state, was the famous Tennessee frontiersman David Crockett. In the 167 years that have passed since the famous battle, many visitors have reported seeing the spectre of a tall, stately Mexican officer walk slowly through the remaining buildings of the Alamo and around the grounds, arms clasped behind his back, slowly shaking his head in sorrow. It is believed that this is the restless spirit of General Manuel Fernandez, one of Santa Anna's regimental commanders, who had opposed the final assault on the grounds. Now we're going to Pennsylvania, and we're going to visit the Eastern-State-Penitentary. And this place, with its looming, gloomy, high stone walls, crumbling corridors, and stark cells that once housed thousands of hardcore criminals, the Eastern-State-Penitentiary certainly looks haunted. Its 142-year history is full of suicide, madness, disease, murder and torture, making it easy to imagine the spirits of troubled souls left behind to roam its abandoned halls. The harsh punishments used on prisoners are enough to make you shiver even without seeing a ghost. There was the water bath, in which inmates were dunked and then hung out on a wall in winter until ice formed on their skin. The mad chair, which bound an inmate so tightly that circulation was cut off, later necessitating amputations. The iron gag, in which an inmate's hands were tied behind the back and strapped to an iron collar in the mouth so that any movement caused the tongue to tear and bleed profusely. And the hole, a dank underground cell, where unfortunate souls had no light, no human contact, no exercise, no toilet, and little food and air. The prison, which closed in 1971, is considered by several sources to be one of the most haunted places in America. It has been featured on Ghost Adventures and Most Haunted Live, Sci-Fi's Ghost Hunters, and MTV's Fear. Dozens of paranormal researchers visit every year and report that it's a hub of otherworldly activity. Perhaps most convincingly, there are the stories of eerie experiences by visitors, staff, guards, and inmates that have corroborated each other since the 1940s. Have you been to this prison? Have you visited here and had an experience? Share your experience in the comments below. Number 4 is probably the most famous haunted place in the USA, and that's got to be the Gettysburg National Military Park. The spirits of the dead are believed to still linger on the grounds of the Civil War bloodiest battle. In July 1863, more than 50,000 Americans were killed at Gettysburg. The lifeless bodies of thousands were later dumped in mass graves. Walk the haunting 10,000-acre battlefield and see the National Cemetery and field hospitals where nurses desperately tried to save soldiers' lives. You may just counter some strange activity: cameras malfunctioning, the sounds of weeping nurses and ghostly apparitions, as many soldiers are said to still haunt the place where they spent the final moments of their unfinished lives. Pennsylvania Gettysburg-Hotel was constructed back in 1797 in the very centre of haunted Lincoln Square and just a few blocks away from the infamously active Gettysburg battlefield. It is well known that the monumental Battle of Gettysburg took place all over the city and wasn't just designated to the battlefields. Due to the large numbers of injuries and casualties the battle caused, any occupiable building was free game for the military to use as a meeting spot or field hospital, where people with little to no medical experience were expected to tend to the injured, and anyone with a still beating heart was considered medical staff. The Gettysburg Hotel sits mere steps away from the massive graveyard that is the Gettysburg battlefield. During the heat of the battle, injured soldiers were brought to the building that is now the Gettysburg Hotel to be treated. Doctors and nurses cared for thousands of injured and dying men at the hotel, many of them succumbing to their wounds within the hotel walls. Hotel staff and guests alike report strange happenings in the hotel, including apparitions, disembodied voices, even a specific entity named Rachel, who is believed to be a Civil War nurse who cared for patients at the hotel. Guests report seeing a slim woman walking the halls of the hotel, seemingly in search of something or someone. She is known to rummage through guest belongings. Rachel's spirit has been seen wandering the streets outside the hotel, possibly looking for soldiers to tend to. Two other ghosts are reported regularly at this hotel, an unknown soldier and his lady. They're most seen dancing at the hotel ballroom. While both of their identities are unknown, many visitors wonder who these lovebirds could be. Perhaps a stay at the Gettysburg Hotel would answer this question. And don't be surprised if you find your clothing and personal belongings strewn about the room because Rachel's visited. Number 6. And this time we're off to the UK. And first stop is Birmingham, in Aston Hall. It's a Grade 1 listed Jacobean house, built between the 1618 and 1635. Today it's used as a museum. The mansion is said to be haunted by Sir Thomas Holt, who built the hall, as well as several other regular sighted ghosts. There's been multiple sightings of a female spirit, a white lady who was thought to be Holt's daughter, Mary. Holt's imprisoned her in a room for years, as he didn't approve of her choice of lover. The story goes that she went mad and died 16 years later. There's also the spirit of a servant boy called Dick, who's said to have hung himself in the staff quarters in the attic, due to the fear of repercussions after being accused of theft. Other visitors to the building have reported seeing a green lady sitting on a chair in the Great Hall, who is said to be Holt's housekeeper. Records show that Holtz was charged with her murder, but he wasn't found guilty of the crime. Number 7 is Whitby Abbey in Yorkshire. This 7th century Christian monastery, a Grade 1 listed building, is a legendary monastery that has sat in silent ruin for centuries. The impressive example of early ecclesiastical architecture is safeguarded by the English heritage, and apart from being home to 3 terrifying spectres dating back to Saxon times, the eerie setting of the ruined abbey inspired Bram Stoker to pen his immortal novel of horror, Dracula. Whitby Abbey was founded in 657 CE by the Anglo-Saxon monarch King Oswald of Northumbria. When the abbey was completed, Oswald appointed Lady Hilda as his first abbess. Several miracles have been attributed to Lady Hilda, including her banishing a plague of serpents from Whitby using a magic whip. Due to these miracles, Hilda was canonised by the church and elevated to sainthood. 2 centuries later, in 867, the abbey was plundered and destroyed by Vikings, and following the Norman conquest, was rebuilt by Renfried, a soldier in service to William the Conqueror. Trouble has followed Whitby Abbey down through the centuries, eventually ending in 1540. During the dissolution of the monasteries, the abbey was raided and destroyed by the forces of King Henry VIII. Since then, the abbey had remained in ruins. Perhaps due to its isolated location and the adversity of what it's known throughout its history, Whitby has gained the reputation of being haunted. Whitby Abbey has become a popular tourist attraction in North Yorkshire for those who have an interest in history and architecture, but a history of hauntings as well. The ghosts of Whitby Abbey carefully watch the living with curious dead eyes and manifest when the living least expect it. Considering its long history of hauntings, it's only fitting that Hilda, the first abbess, haunts the building. On dark nights when the wind blows in from the sea, Hilda appears in the highest window on the north side of the abbey. She only manifests for a few moments, forlornly gazing out of the window, and vanishes. Hilda isn't the only former bride of Christ that haunts the ruins of the abbey. According to the legend, Constance de Beverley, a young nun, broke her vow of celibacy when she carried on a secret affair with a young knight. When her indiscretion was revealed, Constance was walled up alive in the Abbey by her sisters in Christ. Visitors to the Abbey have reported the eerie screams of a woman in agony being carried on the breeze. Others have reported witnessing the fleeting image of a young woman running through the Abbey. It's believed the phantom of Constance de Beverley is attempting to flee her captors before judgment was being carried out. Ever since the Abbey was closed, there has been rumours of a vast treasure buried somewhere on the grounds. A rumour that has brought many treasure hunters to the Abbey's front door. One of the treasure hunters learned the hard way was the treasure had a guardian. A number of years ago, a local minister and his daughter went to the ruin late one night with a shovel in hand and an advance in their hearts. While digging, the daughter felt a tap on her shoulder. Believing it was her father, she turned to look and a horrifying sight met her eyes. She let out a blood-curdling shriek of fear and fainted dead away. When her father discovered her, she was just coming to and a crazed look filled her eyes. When she regained her senses, she told her father that she saw a towering, headless apparition commanding her to leave or die. Since that night, all searches for the treasure has all but ceased, and understandably so. No one wants to anger the treasure's eldritch guardian. Whitby Abbey is open to the public and is a popular destination for locals as well as international tourists. Now we're off to Ireland, and one of their haunted castles is Leap Castle. Built in 1250 AD, throughout its 400-year history, Leap Castle has witnessed a number of dastardly deeds and horrific events. One of the most famous events concerns the Bloody Chapel. Leap was the stronghold of the old Carroll clan, and when the chieftain died in 1532, a power struggle broke out between his sons. One was a priest, and as he was saying Mass in the chapel one Sunday, his brother stormed in and slew him at the altar. This shocking act is the story behind the castle's main haunting, that of the priest who walks the halls. But when workmen renovated the chapel in the 19th century, they uncovered a new horror. They found a hidden room behind the altar with a trapdoor. Underneath, there was a spiked obelet. Unsuspecting victims would fall through the door to their deaths on the spikes below. Those that survived were left to rot and starve to death. When the workmen found the room, they recovered 3 cartloads of bones. In 1599, another deadly deed occurred at Leap Castle. Charles O'Carroll, the last chieftain at Leap, was at war with the Earl of Tyrone and hired the McMahon clan from Monaghan and mercenaries. After they had fought for him, O'Carroll held a feast for his mercenaries and then had them murdered in their sleep. The McMahon clan are said to haunt the Great Hall at Leap Castle. Many strange incidents have been witnessed at Leap Castle, including apparitions, eerie lights and unexplained ghastly noises. One of the most widely reported was when one owner, Mildred Darby, an amateur occultist, held a séance at the castle. She found herself confronted by a ghostly, inhuman figure and the smell of a decomposing corpse. In the 1970s, a new owner brought in a white witch to exorcise the castle. When she finally emerged, she said the spirits were no longer malevolent, but will not leave the castle. Today, the Ryan family own the castle and live happily amongst the ghosts at Leap Castle. Located at the border of the Sariska Tiger Reserve in the Alwar district of Rajasthan, Bhangarh Fort is a 17th century fort and famous all over India for being the most haunted place in India because of the numerous ghostly experiences and happenings in the fort premises. Villages have sprung up far away from the fort due to the fear of what lies within. Even the Archaeological Survey of India, or the ASI, has forbidden the locals and tourists from entering the fort at night. This completely ruined, haunted fort of Bhangarh does have a very eerie negative aura to it. Several legends have attested to the paranormal happenings inside the fort. The history of the fort dates back to the centuries. Built in the 17th century in Rajasthan, the Bhangarh fort is an ancient specimen. It is believed to have been erected by Man Singh, one of the Naratnas of Akbar's court, for his son Madho Singh. There are two legends to this fort, and the first legend claims that a king named Madho Singh raised the Bhangarh fort after obtaining due permission from an ascetic named Bala Nath, who lived there, having agreed to a condition which said that the shadow of the fort must never fall upon the home of the ascetic. But as fate would have it, one of the ambitious successors of Madho Singh added to the fortifications vertically, thereby causing its ominous shadow to engulf the abode of the ascetic. Lo and behold, once it became to pass, the fort was doomed within no time. The alleged prophecy stood fulfilled, and the Bhangarh fort became haunted. Now the second legend is behind the Bhangarh fort. More popular than the first one, claims that Princess Ratnavati of Bhangarh was responsible for the apocalyptic situation which befell the fort. A local black magician fell in love with her. The princess is believed to have been very beautiful and once tried to bewitch a cosmetic she was supposed to use to make her fall in love with him. The princess smelled suspicion and foiled the entire conspiracy of the black magician by pouring the bewitched cosmetic over a massive stone boulder, which then supposedly crushed the tantric to death. Before the magician breathed his last, he placed a curse upon the entire landscape that no soul would ever be able to live in peace there. The whole landscape around the Bhangarh fort has been haunted since. No one is allowed to enter the fort after sunset or before sunrise. The entire landscape is subsumed by a pall of gloom and a chilling hollowness once the last ray of sunlight holds adieu until arrival the next morning. There are many local tales about paranormal activities in the fort. It depends on a person whether he would believe it or not. It is said that the spirits roam in Bhangarh fort at night and various strange noises are heard. Also, it is said, anyone who enters the fort at night would not be able to return in the morning. One always feels as if their movements are being watched, and the air is charged with a dizzying heaviness. A board put up by the Archaeological Survey of India cautions the visitors not to venture within the premises of the fort during the dark hours. The haunted fort of Bhangarh has had several stories associated with it, believing one of them is akin to believing that the fort indeed is haunted, and that this is a tale that has been in circulation for years. There is evidence to support the claim of those who say that they tried their luck, either went missing or weren't able to explain anything in the morning. You might say that the entire episodes were mere fragments of imagination, but the fact remains a fact. No one has been able to say anything in the morning. They've gone mad overnight. Old Changi Hospital in Singapore was constructed during Singapore's lengthy era under British colonial rule, although not until somewhat later than this era's initial establishment, and originally for a different purpose. The beginning of the period is usually dated to 1819, when Sir Thomas Stamford Raffles of the British East India Company set up a colony at the mouth of the Singapore River. The buildings that make up what would later become the hospital, meanwhile opened in 1935, mainly as barracks for the British Royal Air Force. Known as Blocks 24 and 37, these buildings were part of the Kitchener Barracks and housed the Royal Engineers stationed at the RAF's Changi base. That all changed during the Japanese occupation of Singapore in the Second World War, however. After defeating the combined powers of British, Indian, Australian and Malayan troops in the Battle of Singapore in February of 1942, the Imperial Japanese Army took control of the region, with the Kempeitai, the Japanese military police, functioning as the primary occupational unit. Between 1942 and 1945, life in Singapore was a time of mass terror, full of systematic purges and characterised by constant fear and scarcity. At this time, the Kitchener Barracks were appropriated by the occupying Japanese forces for use as both a military hospital and a prison camp. The occupation ended in 1945 with the surrender of Japan to Allied forces, and in 1946, Singapore once again came under British rule as a Crown colony. The Crown colony would be dissolved in 1963, at which point Singapore briefly became a state of Malaya. In 1965, however, the country gained independence, and becoming the Republic of Singapore, it remains as such today. Shortly after Singapore's establishment as a British Crown colony, Old Changi Hospital became a hospital, although it wouldn't gain that particular name until it was decommissioned. Blocks 24 and 37 of the Kitchener Barracks were converted to RAF Hospital Changi in 1947, with a third building, Block 161, opening up following its completion in 1962. The hospital was highly regarded at the time and noted for being modern and the quality of its equipment. Its maternity ward had a particularly good reputation, aiding in the births of more than 1,000 children through 1971. It retained that name for more than 20 years until it closed in 1997. In the late 80s, a project was put in motion to build a newer hospital in a more easily accessible area. When that new facility was built, then the new Changi Hospital was known today. Changi General Hospital opened in 1998, and the original Changi Hospital, as you see in the picture, shut its doors for good. But although Old Changi Hospital was no longer admitting patients after the late 90s, the buildings remained standing. And in the early 2000s, some curious stories starting to emerge regarding the abandoned medical campus. Stories that imply that some of the people who have been involved with the hospital over the decades never quite left. Stories that claim the facility to be, in a word, haunted. Most of the stories stem from the 3 years during the blocks 24 and 37 were under the control of the Kempeitai. The souls still roaming the hallways are said to belong to the untold thousands of people who died on the premises, the victims of cruelty after cruelty afflicted upon them by their captors. Loud, unexplained noises and screams are commonly heard. Human-shaped shadows with no source have reportedly been spotted. Sometimes visitors report seeing a small boy sitting and gazing off into nowhere. Others say that they've seen an old man walking down the hall, and still others say it's not a man they've seen but a woman. Paranormal investigators have reported seeing lights turn on and turn off when there's no longer electricity in the building. They've also seen shadows. Different activity reported in the emergency department was once located, and they also found a secret tunnel running underneath the hospital, perhaps hidden bunkers, which are no longer accessible, but must have been used for purposes once upon a time. Continue to hold energy which affects the rest of the hospital even now. The Philippines is not only rich in history, but also ghost stories. They're also great for history lovers, as these spirit-infested places are also historical spots that offer real-life context in the hauntings. This one's Fort Santiago, and aside from being a popular destination for history lovers, it's also the best and most accessible ghost hunting place for dark tourists in Metro Manila. Fort Santiago is known to be a very active haunted place that has accumulated ghosts from centuries of colonisation, wars and calamities. Among them is one notable spirit, the Philippines' national hero, Jose Rizal, who was imprisoned at Fort Santiago before his execution in Bhangarh, Rizal Park. It is said that the hero's ghost lingers here, with some claiming that they've seen his apparition or even heard his voice. Aokigahara is a dense forest that lies at the base of Mount Fuji in Japan. Many urban legends surround this forest, and some believe it to be haunted because of its tragic history of a suicide spot. Please be aware that this story contains sensitive and potentially disturbing content about mental health and suicide. If this story is not for you, please stop watching and maybe skip to the next one. Due to the high levels of stress faced by Japanese, Japan is seen one of the top countries of high suicide rates. According to a report by The Guardian, depression, serious illness and debt are amongst the common reasons one seeks to end their life. Back in the feudal era in Japan, suicide was seen as an act of honour. Samurai warriors would rather commit suicide, or known as ritual disemboweling, than fall into the hands of their enemy, a way to uphold their honour and dignity. Even in World War II, soldiers who opened the kamikaze, the special attack group, to sacrifice for their country was seen as respectful and honoured. Nowadays, many have chosen to end their life not for honourable reasons, but mainly because they could not fit into society. As such, many who decide to suicide will choose a place where it is hidden and not easy to be found to spend their last moment. And for this Japanese forest, Aokigahara Forest is one of the most common locations. Aokigahara is also known as the Japan's Demon Forest, the Suicide Forest, and the perfect place to die. This unique forest, which is very quiet with hardly any wildlife, has turned into a common spot amongst the Japanese to end their life. And because of the silence where you can hardly hear any birds singing, many Japanese believe that the forest is haunted and dare not go into or nearby. This 35 square kilometre forest is cold, rocky and contains some 200 caves, of which a few such as the Ice Cave and the Wind Cave have been popular amongst the tourists. Because of the rocky area and thick trees, Aokigahara's surroundings are almost identical, making it the perfect journey for those who are making a one-way trip. For trekkers and hikers, they often carry along plastic tape to mark their way so they will find their way out again. The locals who live near Aokigahara said that they could easily identify three types of visitors who head to the infamous forest: the trekkers, the curious, or those planning a one-way trip. It all started with a mysterious novel called Kurai Jakai, translated as The Black Sea of Trees, by Seiko Matsumoto in 1960. The novel ends romantically with the lovers committed suicide in the forest, which revitalised the suicide forest's popularity amongst those who wanted to end their life. Local police stopped publishing the number of suicides that took place in Aokigahara, a way to downplay its popularity amongst those who seek to commit suicide, and also a way to encourage more tourism in this amazing forest. The last data released was way back in 2003, where 105 confirmed suicides were registered. It is believed that the number could be many more, as they are never found. In 2010, police records showed that 247 attempted to commit suicide in the forest, but only 54 of them succeeded. As such, local authorities have put up suicide prevention signs at the forest entrance. The signs read, "Your life is something precious that was given to you by your parents, and think about your parents, siblings and children once more. Do not be troubled alone." The signs end with a helpline telephone number, hoping the lost souls who seek to die would call for help. In Japanese mythology, Aokigahara is known to be haunted by demons, a reason why some Japanese are still afraid to enter the forest. It is believed that those who enter the forest would never return. Another reason is that they feel that the forest is haunted due to the yurei, or souls filled with hatred, sadness, or desire to revenge. According to legend, people bring their family members during famine to the forest and leave them to die there in order to save their food for other family members. Those left in the forest would slowly die due to starvation, turning them into yurei. In the Japanese popular belief, if a person dies in a deep sense of hatred, anger, sadness, or desire for revenge, their soul can't leave this world and continues to wander, appearing to people affected by this spell or those who cross their path. These souls are called yurei, and they can be found in many modern cultural references, such as movies as well. Unlike Western horror movies, where the ghost wants something specific in order to be able to rest in peace, the yurei wants nothing in particular. They just want to have their curse removed or conflicts resolved. The belief in yurei continues to today. When a body is found in Aokigahara, forest guardians place it in a room next to the forest before being sent to authorities. Legend has it that if the body is left alone in the room, its yurei move around screaming in the room. Hence, forest guards will play rock, paper, scissors to determine who the unlucky companion to the body is. Even if the Transylvanian Bran castle in Romania was never home to a vampire, it's still blood-curdling. Bram Stoker's character was inspired by Count Vlad the Impaler, who was known for his bloodthirstiness. Bran Castle is apparently one of the world's most haunted castles, and ghost hunters from all over the world trek to the medieval stone fortress each year to try their luck at spotting the paranormal. But the castle is even more famous for another bit of folklore. Apparently, it served as the inspiration for Dracula's castle, due to its historic affiliation with notoriously bloodthirsty ruler Vlad the Impaler Tempest. Bran Castle in Romania is rumoured to be the most haunted castle in the world, and it's heavily marketed as Dracula's castle. Bran Castle has stood for many years, first being mentioned in documents dating back to 1377. It was strategically positioned upon a vacant hilltop to guard a mountain pass. It later became an important fortified stronghold against the invading Ottoman Turk during the 1400s. Bran Castle has had a long and interesting history, which has led to a number of supposed hauntings. Vlad Tepes was a notorious warlord during the 1400s. He is better known as Vlad the Impaler for his primary execution method of impalement. Vlad developed a fierce reputation for torturing and killing hundreds of thousands using this grotesque technique. Rumours swirled about his bloodlust, including cannibalism and drinking victims' blood. Those legends are largely what inspired Bram Stoker's famous vampire character, Dracula. Bran Castle does have a number of impressive ghost stories. The most famous ghost to reside within Bran Castle is a royal ghost. During 1920, the castle became a royal residence. Shortly after this, Queen Marie moved in claiming it as her home and retreat. She loved Bran Castle so much, she even ordered its restoration. Since her death, many have claimed that her ghost remains within the castle she loved dearly. There has been many reports of her apparition being spotted within the castle and its surrounding gardens. Additionally, many more claims of paranormal activity occurring within the castle have been made. Unexplained orbs of light, shadow figures, possessions, electronic voice phenomena, and even poltergeist activity have all been captured and experienced at Bran Castle. Some even claim that Vlad Tepes' spirit haunts the castle. Chateau Brissac is a castle located in the commune of France. The castle is recorded to have been built during the 11th century and has a long and interesting history. But like many castles around the world, the Chateau Brissac is said to be possessed by its own resident ghost. This is La Dame Verte of the Green Lady, who is said to be the ghost of an unfaithful wife murdered by her husband during the 15th century. The Green Lady is said to be the ghost of a woman by the name of Charlotte de Brise, who was the illegitimate daughter of King Charles VII and his mistress Agnes Sorel. She is also the half-sister of King Louis XI, and in 1462 a marriage was arranged between Charlotte and Jacques de Brise, a nobleman. It has been claimed that the marriage was politically motivated and that the two did not love each other. Additionally, it's been said that the two individuals had quite different characters. For instance, Jacques is said to have enjoyed outdoor activities such as hunting, while Charlotte was more inclined to a sophisticated life. On May 31st, 1477, Jacques is said to have returned from a hunting trip, had dinner with his wife, and then went to his room. It seems the couple did not sleep in the same bed, and in the middle of the night a servant woke Jacques up to inform him that his wife was having an affair with a man by the name of Pierre Laverne. Jacques caught his wife and her lover red-handed and in a fit of rage murdered the adulterous couple. Apparently Jacques moved out of the chateau shortly after the murder, as he could not stand the moaning of his late wife and her lover's ghosts. Her favourite area to haunt is said to be the tower room of the chapel, where she can be found in her green dress, hence the name Green Lady. Additionally, it's been claimed that the ghost face has holes in the place of a nose and eyes, perhaps a reflection of what was done to her when she was murdered. Her moans are said to be heard throughout the chateau in the early hours of the morning. Around 11 kilometres outside the city of Offaly in northern Lithuania, an old earthen mound hunches under the weight of thousands of crosses. As the wind blows across the fields of rural Offaly, all-night rosaries clink against the metal and wooden crucifixes, filling the air with eerie chimes. Known as the Hill of Crosses, the mound's history is a complex narrative of wars and uprisings. Ancient legends, mysterious visions, and accounts of haunting surround the hill, and its exact origins remain a mystery to this day. According to folklore, there was once a church where the hill now stands. During a terrible storm, lightning struck the church, and the tempest buried it under sand and rock with everyone still inside. Locals say that you can glimpse a ghost procession of monks at the foot of the hill at sunrise. Throughout the ages, magical appearances, visions of saints, and sightings of ghosts have been part of the hill's history. Another legend says that in early 1300s the hill served as a platform for a wooden castle manned by the pagan barons. In 1348 the castle was destroyed by the Order of the Brothers of the Sword, German warrior monks, tasked with the Christianization of Lithuania, which is now Latvia and Estonia. Many people believe that the pagan warriors survived the battle, piled their slain comrades' bodies together and buried them, thus forming the mound. Like those of the monks, the souls of the fallen pagan warriors are said to still haunt the hill at night. However, the most renowned story of the hill's creation is the tale of a desperate father whose daughter suddenly fell gravely ill. As the girl lay on her deathbed, the father had a vision of a woman who told him to make a wooden cross and place it on a nearby hill. If he did so, she said, his daughter would recover. In the morning, the despairing man hurriedly carved a wooden cross and rushed it to the hill. When he returned home, his daughter greeted him at the doorway, perfectly well again. Ever since, people have been leaving crosses in hope their prayers will be answered. Not every cross has been left by an optimistic pilgrim. Some are instead reminders of quiet rebellion. After surviving medieval sieges by the invading German Crusaders and the 19th century uprising by Lithuanians against Russian Tsar Alexander II, the Hill of Crosses faced its most aggressive threat, the Soviet Union. In an effort to stamp out Christianity in the Eastern Bloc, the Soviet government attempted to level the hill numerous times during the 1960s and 70s. They bulldozed it, burned the wooden crosses and removed the metal and stone ones for scrap and construction. People who brought crosses to the hill were fined and incarcerated, but the crosses on the mound just kept multiplying, left in the dead of night as an act of defiance against religious oppression. Now, more than a quarter of a century after the fall of the Soviet Union, the crosses still stand. In the years since, the site has become a magnet for pilgrims of all denominations. Christians' crosses stand back beside carvings bearing Jewish inscription and the words from the Quran. The Hill of Crosses doesn't really belong to anyone, and thus belongs to all. The Hill of Crosses, maintained by the county of Offaly and local Franciscan monks, is now covered in more than 100,000 crucifixes and other religious icons, and the number is constantly increasing. Moosham Castle in Austria is considered one of the world's most haunted castles, and it's certainly closely linked with the macabre. Not only Moosham was the centre of the Salzburg witch trials, commonly thought as the bloodiest in Austria, it was also the site for werewolf hunts in the 1800s. Moosham Castle took centre stage during Salzburg witch trials between 1675 and 1690. As the administrative centre, both trial, sentencing and execution were held there. 139 people were killed in total. Horrifically, 39 children between the ages of 10 and 14 were accused and executed for witchcraft. 53 teenagers also met a bloody end. Unusually, a large proportion was male, 113 of them in fact. All except 2 individuals who were murdered were beggars. The records named every single victim. The youngest, a boy named Haneri, had just turned 10. The eldest, a Marguerite Reinberg, was 80 years old. The method of execution was brutal. Even for the time, the sadistic authorities preferred a process of slow torture. Only when an individual was close to death would they be offered the small mercy of hanging or decapitation. They made an example of the children by chopping their hands off and marking their chests with a burning iron. They were then kept alive and paraded in front of the locals as a warning. The fact that the victims were almost universally homeless cannot be ignored. There was mass hysteria due to plague, disease, the spread of famine, and the general post-war poverty and hygiene. Those unfortunate souls were seen as carriers of all that was bad and ungodly. They had no one to vouch for them, to accuse them of sorcery, was a quick and easy way to get rid of them. After the witch trials, Moosham reverted back to business as normal. However, by the late 18th century, the castle experienced another troubled period. Archbishop Count Hieronymus von Colloredo dissolved the Moosham bailiwick in 1790, and without funding from the church, the building fell into a state of disrepair. Not long after that, there was reports of deer and cattle and being found dead in the castle grounds. The bloodthirsty locals immediately jumped to the logical conclusion that werewolves were at the castle. The then residents of Moosham were rounded up and duly murdered for their nocturnal activities. For several decades afterwards, Moosham remained abandoned. It wasn't until 1886 when Austrian explorer and patron of the arts, Count Johann Brissac, purchased and moved into the property that life again once graced its walls. He began a long process of restoration, and it remains in the family to this day. Though Moosham is privately owned, it is open to the public, and there is a lot of art collection from the family, and accommodation can be booked there. There is a popular for believers of the supernatural, looking out for the castle's many ghosts. It's rumoured that the screams of witch trial victims can be heard at night, and werewolves apparently still prowl the grounds. And with a dark history like Moosham, it's not surprised this place could be haunted. But this is the last one in our series, and I want to say thank you for watching. And if you've visited any of these locations around the world, please let us know in the comments, and if you felt anything paranormal. Bye for now.